The history of the 20th century, as well as the rebirth of San Francisco and the story of postcards, are all intertwined. They coexisted. If you study the cards, you see the themes reoccurring and realize maybe love is forever. Some things just never cease. You know, little cable cars still climb halfway to the stars. As William Faulkner said, the past is never dead. It's not even past. You know, they had postcard collectors then, and they are still around today.
What kind do you collect?
All sorts. I just have mostly elephants.
I don't look for anything in particular. I just look for imagery that's interesting or unusual. It's relatively inexpensive. It's an inexpensive habit. I'm interested in photography. It's, part of it is the hunt, and just amassing a collection of things you love. I don't know. I don't know what it is exactly.
And we don't know what exists in postcards. No, we don't. We know some artists sign some stuff, but you always discover something that nobody never seen.
So I grew up in postcards, doing shows every weekend. We do 50 shows a year, sometimes more, all over the world.
There's a lot of important, famous people that collect postcards. Oprah Winfrey and Whoopi Goldberg collect Black history. There's Leonard Lauder, who owns Esther Lauder Corporation, is probably the biggest postcard collector in America.
I started collecting postcards when I was 6, and I was going to school down in Miami, Florida, in the Art Deco district. And as a little kid, I went to each one of the hotels. I was barely tall enough to reach up to the top of the counter, and took one or two of each one of the postcards. And I love those cards. When I was in high school, someone introduced me to the Detroit Publishing Company. I didn't know what they were, but I loved the way they looked. And as time went on, I started to buy more and more, kept all the numbers in a little more, and it just got to be an obsession with me because I wanted to fill in every single number.
We call it postcard fever, where people will start with one topic and then just get into, just kind of branch out to a lot of different things, and it's kind of funny. I mean, we recognize it because it's what happened to us.
It's a hobby that will satisfy almost any pocket, or any age, or any level of collectors.
Just before we got into the hobby, there was somebody who had entered a life of crime. I mean, he had such a love of buying postcards that he formed this.
There was a lawyer, an estate lawyer,
and he got like a lot of people's money and
because
was investing
he was
it in postcards.
so
and
addicted to postcard collecting.
And I understand that it wasn't necessarily from the idea that he was going to get rich. He just wanted to keep on buying cards.
Well, I'll tell you what they've done for me. They've changed my life, and I'll tell you why. I was working at a job I hated, and I was doing this on the side, and it just started getting bigger and better. And my husband said, "You are so miserable doing what you're doing. Quit your job and see how this goes." And it's like this is what I wanted to be when I grew up, but I didn't know it.
I love the artwork of Schmucker because he used the romantic version of women where they become like Madonnas, and they were just absolute perfection. And there's no making fun of any group. I mean, even when he does the Indian maidens, they're the epitome. They've been, they're of the beauty of Indian maidens. And then, of course, the fantasy that he puts around it. His little goblins and elves, and his fairies are marvelous. So, how can you not like Schmucker's work?
It may be topics such as their hometown. They grew up someplace, and Detroit happened to have taken pictures there. I can think, as of myself, growing up in Detroit. The Detroit Publishing Company was very prolific in publishing many of the Detroit cards, and I loved looking at those.
And people would write to me on postcards of goats, and I thought I'd collect them. I figured if I get 100, I'd have everyone in the world. 20-some years later, I'm up to over 8,000 goat postcards.
I have a delightful collection of Fred Harvey postcards, and the fun is always in the hunt. And this looks like it's underneath the porticos, and it actually stands outside, and it does look like a little newsstand. And sure enough, there's the postcard racks right there on the corner. And so
You look at the messages on the back, you in fact can find people saying, I ate here today, or I stopped here today on my way to. And I suppose these took the place of phone calls that we would normally do now.
When I was young, we'd go visit our different aunts and uncles, and after we'd have lunch, they'd always bring out their albums and postcards, and that was the only way they could communicate with one another, because they didn't have the radio or television at that time, and this way here, they'd go on a visit and they'd send back postcards where they were at, and then they'd always view that and they'd reminisce of the traveling that they made. And some of us weren't able to travel, but through our aunts and uncles, we'd find out what it was like in other parts of the country.
The idea was that you would have a small card with a printed image on one side that could be mailed to people, and you could mail these things back and forth. You could collect them. It was sort of a shorthand form of communication that kind of predates the widespread use of the telephone. Who was it? Someone observed that when the telephone was first invented, no one could really understand its purpose, because you didn't check in with your family and friends several times a day or several times a week. The idea of just calling somebody and saying hi was just a foreign concept that nobody understood. Well, somewhere between the very formal letter writing that preceded it and the real sort of popular acceptance of the telephone as a medium for casual communication, you have this other thing, the postcard. And the idea is that you can just jot down a quick message and you can say, hi, I'm coming over Thursday, let's have lunch. And you drop it in the mail. It cost a penny. It would get there and the people would be waiting for you for lunch when you showed up on Thursday.